So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. As Robin said, I am the new nutrition program coordinator at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, but I've been working with PCRM for a few years prior to this as a consultant. I was one of the co-authors for the African Heritage Power Plate with them and also taught a few of their online classes. So today I'm going to be talking about plant-based nutrition and cancer. So we're going to talk about what cancer is, go over some statistics and disparities, and then go over what we can do to reduce our risk in terms of diet, and a little bit into the mechanisms of how that works. So what is cancer? Well, the first thing you need to know is what is normal growth. Normally, human cells grow and multiply through a process of cell division to form new cells. Let me put on this laser pointer. And when those cells grow old or become damaged, then the cell undergoes apoptosis, or you can think of this as a programmed cell death or self-destruction. What happens with cancer is that some of those cells, they become damaged, but they don't die. So they don't undergo that cell apoptosis. And they begin to multiply and get more and more mutations. And then eventually you have uncontrolled growth that can turn into cancer. So there's actually over 100 forms of cancer, but they all have in common this abnormal cell division. So how common is cancer? 4 in 10 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Prostate, lung, and colorectal are the most common in men, accounting for 43% of all cancers, and breast, lung, and colorectal cancer are 50% of the new cancer cases in women. So let's talk about some cancer disparities. African Americans experience more illness, worse outcomes, and premature death compared to their white counterparts. So this is partially greater obstacles to cancer prevention, detection, treatment, and survival, with Black people having the highest death rate and the shortest survival of any racial or ethnic group for most cancers in the United States. Now, I want to show you some specific examples. This is prostate cancer. This top blue line with the triangles is the average incidence of cancer in Black individuals, about 175 men per 100,000 cases in 2018. And you can compare this to this red line. This is the average for white men at about 100 per 100,000 cases. Now look at this, the mortality rate, a little bit bigger of a gap. Prostate cancer disparities are the largest of all cancer disparities. African American and Black men have around 80% higher incidence rate. But they're also more likely to be diagnosed at a younger age, more likely to present with a more advanced or aggressive disease, and have 2.3 times higher mortality rate. Now let's look at breast cancer. The highest rates are actually in white women, followed closely by Black women. But despite having similar rates of breast cancer, so we see them pretty close right here, Black and African American women are more likely than white women to die of this disease. They're actually 40% more likely to die of breast cancer than white women, and are also twice as likely to die if they're over 50 years old. Now, I won't go through all of these, but colorectal cancer, we have a similar trend. This is male incidence, male mortality, female incidence, kind of tied here with American, Indian, and Alaskan Native. And then female mortality. So this mortality incidence ratio, it demonstrates additional disparities that reflect the treatment and survival differences. African American, Blacks, and also Hispanic Latino patients are less likely to have the localized or regional cancer and are therefore, it's less amenable to the chance of cure by surgery or radiation, and it's more metastatic compared to the disease in whites. So what can we do to help break these trends and close those gaps? Here's some good news. 30 to 50% of cancer is preventable by modification or avoidance of risk factors or implementing prevention strategies. This is from the World Health Organization. And these strategies include diet, weight, exercise, smoking, alcohol, other lifestyle and exposure factors. So today we're going to focus on diet, and we're going to look at how a plant-based diet can be used as a dietary plan to help prevent cancer. So, is there research to show a vegan diet helps reduce cancer risk? There is. It is not a foolproof magic bullet, but it can absolutely help. Here's some data from epidemiology studies, and this is a meta-analysis of 86 cross-sectional studies. So that's when you take a survey of someone and what their cancer risk is at one time, and 10 prospective cohort studies. So that's when you do that survey, but you're following through the years. And what they found was that a vegetarian diet was associated with 8% decreased cancer incidence, and a vegan diet was associated with 15% decreased cancer incidence. Now, here's some more data from an Adventist Health Study 2. So they found 16% decreased overall cancer risk. So pretty similar to what they found here, but they also looked at female-specific cancers and prostate cancers. Now, the Adventist Health Studies, this is from Loma Linda University, a huge population here. The females in this study, 69,000 participants, and they were followed over 4 years, and they found a decrease by 34% in female-specific cancers. And with the men, this was about 26,000 males, and they found similarly 35% decreased prostate cancer. So why do we think this is? Well, there's lots of reasons. Multiple studies have showed, this is perhaps the most obvious, that consumption of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes are associated with a reduced risk of certain cancers. We should all immediately recognize these food groups, right? These are the same groups in the power plate: fruits, vegetables, legumes, and grains. And just to give an example, a diet low in fruits and vegetables was found to contribute to 18% of oral cavity cancers, 17% of laryngeal cancers, and 9% of lung cancers. What else about a plant-based diet can help? Well, there's more mechanisms here, and I want you to know that cancer goes through 3 main stages: initiation, promotion, and progression. And a plant-based diet can actually help throughout all of those phases. So starting with the initiation phase, this is where you want to minimize exposure to carcinogens that induce DNA damage and initiate the process. Well, red and processed meats are carcinogens. The World Health Organization identified them, and we'll talk about that later. Some other possible contributors to this increased risk: heterocyclic amines, or HCAs, and we'll discuss this later as well. Charred meats also contain polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAH. These are carcinogens that form during incomplete burning. For example, when meat is grilled over an open flame, or maybe you're grilling a hamburger or grilled chicken. Now, plant-based diets also help during the promotion and progression. How so? Well, low-fat plant-based diets are linked to lower estrogen levels, and estrogen can act as a promoter for certain breast cancers. Certain phytochemicals, like those listed here, can help interrupt the cellular processes that are part of the cancer progression. And low-fat vegan diets have even been found to enhance the cancer-killing powers of the human body. So this is things like increased natural killer cells. We also see when you're on a plant-based diet, you tend to avoid saturated fat, which is known to be associated with prostate cancer. And we also see it's rich in fiber, which we're going to talk about a lot in a few slides. So I'm going to go over a list of the strategies that we've identified to help reduce cancer risk with a plant-based diet. But to give you a summary overall, what we promote is a low-fat vegan diet that is full of fiber and nutrients from whole foods. So starting with eating high fiber, low fat, why are we doing this? Well, this type of eating promotes a healthy weight and it facilitates waste removal and maintains appropriate hormone levels, all of which decrease cancer risk. So how is this happening? Fiber. Fiber is your best friend. So let me give a little background. Your liver filters your blood and it cleans out unhealthy substances like excess cholesterol or hormones or medications, and it packages it into bile to send to the intestine through a little tube called the bile duct to be excreted. And some stuff in the bile, it helps us digest fats, and that's all good, but a lot of it is actually waste. So where does fiber come in? There's two types of fiber. Both play a role here. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber dissolves in water and it can act as like a sponge that soaks up excess cholesterol and hormones. And that way our body doesn't reabsorb them. So remember, this is a good thing. You don't want to reabsorb your waste, you want to excrete it. And that's also where insoluble fiber helps. We all know when we have a lot of fiber, we tend to use the bathroom a little bit more often. That's thanks to the insoluble fiber, because this fiber acts as a brush that cleans out the intestines and helps it keep moving. So these fibers, it makes it hard to reabsorb our waste, keeps it moving along so there's actually less time to reabsorb it. And those two work together to keep our blood clean and our intestines clean. And in doing so, lowers our exposure to the substances that can help promote cancer. It's actually been said that fiber can contribute or does contribute to 10% of colorectal cancers. And it's not just colorectal cancer, but also those hormone-related cancers. So remember how I said the sponge is picking up those hormones and excreting them? Well, some of those hormones are estrogen and testosterone, and both of those levels drop when you have a low-fat, high-fiber diet. So let's talk a little bit more about the low-fat now that we've got fiber out of the way. Everything we say is always evidence-based, so I want to show you some supporting data for how this low-fat diet can help. This is the Women's Intervention Nutrition Study. For this study, women were enrolled who had received standard care of chemotherapy or tamoxifen. They were eating greater than 20% of their calories from fat, and they had had a resection of invasive breast cancer. They were randomized in a low-fat diet or a control where they didn't change their diet at all. And what they found was the low-fat group was eating about 33 grams of fat a day, and the control group was eating about 51.3 grams of fat a day. So what were the results? After 5 years, the relapse-free survival rate was 24% higher in the low-fat group. And that's only a difference of about 20 grams of fat. Now, what about prostate cancer? We have a study of a low-fat vegan intervention with 84 men who had untreated prostate cancer in the early stages who had elected not to undergo treatment. They were in the study for 1 year, and they were either usual care group or a lifestyle group that was a low-fat vegan supplemented with soy products and 30 minutes of walking and stress management. And what did they find? The usual care group increased their PSA by 6%. That's prostate-specific antigen. And that can kind of give you a feel for how the cancer is advancing. And 6 of the 43 participants required cancer treatments. In the low-fat lifestyle group, there was a decrease in the PSA by 4%, and not one participant needed treatment. All right, so strategy number 2 is maintaining a healthy weight. And there are a few mechanisms for this. There's a healthy weight can have anti-tumor messaging because when excess energy is available, that leads for signaling of growth. That turns on the growth signaling. There's also less inflammation. This is good because chronic inflammation can actually lead to more growth signaling. There's fewer blood vessels to feed the cancer. And there's also more programmed cell death. And remember, sometimes people think this is not good because it's cell death, but remember that this is programmed cell death, meaning that it's supposed to happen when the cells are damaged beyond repair. And being overweight can sometimes suppress this cell death. And I probably don't have to mention this to this group, but there is a strong relationship between plant-based diets and BMI. This is also from an Adventist Health study. Vegans had the lowest BMI. This is lacto-ovo vegetarians, so with with dairy and eggs. This is pesco, so they add in fish. These are people who are eating a little bit of meat and more meat. And you can see this dose response as you add on the animal products into the diet. So no animal products, dairy and eggs, fish, meat, more meat, you're increasing the BMI. So if you want to maintain a healthy body weight for this strategy, a plant-based diet can really help you. All right, so strategy number 3 is to avoid meat. So like I said before, the World Health Organization named processed meat, so that's things like hot dogs or sausages, as a group 1 carcinogen. So it causes human cancer. And they named red meat as a group 2 carcinogen, meaning that it's probably carcinogenic to humans. So this is pork and beef and lamb. The American Institute for Cancer Research stated that there was no safe amount for these foods, these processed meats. It was actually found that red and processed meat contributed to 5.4% and 8.2% of colorectal cancers, respectively. So let's look at some data. I like to show data for everything that we're saying. So this is a study from the International Journal of Epidemiology, where the researchers compared processed meat consumption with cancer risk. And they found that adding 20 grams of processed meat a day, which is only about 1 slice of ham or 1 slice of bacon, increased the risk by 20%. So what that means is just a single slice of bacon consumed daily can increase your risk for colon cancer by a pretty significant amount. And for red meat, they found every 50 grams, so that's about 1 serving of a roast beef or 1 serving of lamb, this increased the risk by 19%. And the other interesting thing from this study was that fiber from bread and cereals actually reduced the risk by 14%. And the authors noted some of the potential mechanisms for this are naturally occurring components of meat, like heme iron and protein, as well as the generated components like those heterocyclic amines. So let's keep this in mind because colorectal cancer is the 2nd leading cause of cancer death. And going back to fiber here, 10 grams of dietary fiber cuts the likelihood of having a polyp by 9%. So we're just seeing all of these benefits of the plant-based diet helping in different ways with different percentages, and trust me, it will add up. So here are those heterocyclic amines, and I want to take a minute to talk about this because dozens and dozens of studies have shown that the more of these that are in your foods that you eat, the more likely you are to develop cancer down the road. Where do these come from? They are formed at high temperatures from the reaction between creatinine found in muscle meats, amino acids, and sugar. And this reaction occurs especially readily in grilled meats. And I mention this because those are usually seen as healthy, right? A lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to have the fried chicken, so I'll have a grilled chicken instead and be healthy, without realizing that there are these cancer-causing chemicals in the grilled chicken. And it's actually the formation of these chemicals increases with not just the temperature, but the duration of cooking. And typically grilled meats are cooked for longer than fried meat. And so it actually really builds up. And last thing about this I want to mention is what happens when you grill a veggie burger, or you grill some peaches or pineapple, or maybe you have mushrooms on the grill. Nothing happens. It just warms up, right? There is no reaction because it's a vegetable protein and not an animal muscle. All right, and meat and breast cancer. So this is the Nurses Health Study, 88,000 women for 20 years. And there was a 13% higher risk per serving per day of red meat. Meat is not really good for you, but it's worse if you're preteen or teen, because this is when the breast tissue is developing and it's most sensitive to carcinogens. The more red meat a girl eats in her teens or preteens, actually the higher risk for premenopausal breast cancer and benign breast disease. All right, and eliminating dairy is our next strategy. Who knows the biological purpose of milk? It is to feed a calf, so that they grow rapidly. But we aren't calves, and adults usually don't need to grow. We're going to get into this in just a second. Dairy increases IGF-1. That's insulin-like growth factor. It's found in cow's milk, and it's a little bit like, you can think of it like cholesterol, in the way that when we look at a blood test, you know, oh, higher cholesterol levels are associated with heart disease. Well, when you look at IGF-1, you can see elevated levels of IGF-1 associated with certain types of cancer, especially those in the reproductive system, like prostate and breast cancer. And consumption of milk and dairy products on a regular basis has been shown to increase circulating levels of IGF-1, and vegetarians have the lower levels. So think about milk's job again. You want to get that tiny little calf to grow into this big cow, and once it is grown into the cow, it's old enough to graze and there's no need for the milk anymore. But if the milk's job is to make things grow, imagine what it can do to cancer cells. And it's not just fat, protein, and sugar, but it's the hormones, the antibodies, and the growth factors. It's just like human milk. So it's a potent stimulus for cancer growth. If I were to mix IGF-1 in a test tube with cancer cells, it would cause those cells to grow and multiply like crazy, right? So somebody drinking 3 glasses of milk, or the equivalent to that in dairy products, would see about a 10% rise in the amount of IGF-1 in their bloodstream. And looking at prostate cancer and dairy, so lots of research here. Hopefully I'm not boring you guys. Let's see, the Health Professionals follow-up study found that in male health professionals who typically consumed 2 servings of dairy a day had a 60% increased risk of prostate cancer. And I want to bring up another point here, kind of similar to that grilled chicken versus fried chicken, is that a lot of people think, okay, I won't have the whole milk, but I'll have skim or a low fat milk because it's healthier. This study, the milk that was consumed here was 83% milk that was low fat or skimmed milk. And there's still a 60% increased risk. So it's dairy products in general, right? Not just the whole fat. And 2 years later, the Physicians Health Study found a 30% increase when comparing 2.5 servings to less than half a serving a day of dairy. Now, everyone always asks, well, what about calcium? There's little evidence that eating dairy prevents osteoporosis and fractures, but there's lots of evidence that says high dairy can be associated with increased risk of fatal prostate and ovarian cancer. So we do still need calcium. Low dietary calcium is said to contribute to 5% of colorectal cases. So what do? Well, the good news is there's plenty of other ways to get calcium through plant-based foods. We just have to remember our greens and beans, those are sources. But I just want to bring this up because yes, we do need the calcium that's found in dairy, but we don't need everything else that comes with it. And we can get the calcium from other sources. And besides beans and greens, there are some in other vegetables like winter squash or sweet potato. All right, our last, I think this is our last strategy is to eat the cancer-fighting plant-based foods. So this is your foods with lycopene and beta-carotene and vitamin C, cruciferous vegetables, alien vegetables. And I feel like I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna skip over talking about each one of these and move on to soy. Soy is actually one of those cancer-fighting foods. And it used to be people were afraid of soy. They thought it would cause cancer, but actually it seems to have a major advantage to incorporate soy products into the diet if you've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it actually cuts the risk of the cancer coming back and cuts the risk of cancer death. So survival and risk. And just a quick note, when we're looking at the soy, we want to try to stick to the whole foods. So there's like texturized soy protein, things like that. We want to stick to edamame, soy milk, tofu, tempeh, the ones that are more minimally processed. Okay, so the takeaway is a whole foods, plant-based diet. And hopefully, if you can't remember any of the studies, we can just remember in general, why this is so good, because we're increasing these helpful things like fiber, antioxidants, we're low in fat. We're also avoiding some things that can potentially promote cancer, like meat, dairy, those HCAs, IGF-1. All right, so I'm not sure how much time I have left. But with your knowledge on cancer disparities and with your knowledge of cancer prevention, what are you going to do to move forward? One thing I suggest is really finding solidarity with community. And when I first went vegan, no one in my family was. I had actually never heard of it. And I went to a cookout with my family. One of my aunts told me, "You're not Guyanese anymore." Because I'm vegan, right? And it just occurred to me that the food is so integral to our identity. I felt like I was giving up my culture to eat healthy. But I want others to know that, we're not alone. Only 3% of Americans are vegan, but more than double that among African Americans, with 8% of African American adults. And lots of African Americans are going vegan to take back their healthy heritage and address this public health crisis. And I just wanted to highlight some pages from the African American Vegan Starter Guide. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. You can get this free online. And this I really loved. The back of the book has these historical highlights talking about how African American foodways are rooted in plant-based diets of our ancestors. And these staple foods in traditional West and Central African diets were predominantly vegetarian. Millet and rice and peas and okra and hot peppers and yams. We have a rich culinary heritage, and this kind of highlights some things in the U.S. that I found very, very fun to read, like Dick Gregory, activist, becoming vegan, and his book, and we have things in the newspaper. Morehouse College graduates opening this raw vegan restaurant, vegan food companies. I think this is a soul food vegetarian restaurant. More books, and Tracy McWhorter, who made this guide, starts the first website for African American vegans. So just take a look at that, and I really encourage you to find support in your community, get your family involved, get to know your history and what kind of plant-based foods were prominent in your culture. And this is African Heritage Power Plate. that I was a part of with Old Ways and PCRM. This is the starter guide. I have a few books up here and documentaries, a few websites, and this is from PCRM.org. We have books for the Survivor's Guide and Healthy Eating for Life. Both of them have some good recipes in there as well. And Let's Beat Breastcancer.org. One of my colleagues at PCRM is focusing in on breast cancer and how plant-based diets can help with that in particular. So thank you so much. And I'm going to close this out so I can see your faces. And I'm happy to take any questions.